On March 25th, the first eclipse of 2025 arrives, and it lands on the exact axis that governs who you are versus who you have learned to be for everyone else. A full moon, a lunar eclipse. In Libra, opposing the Aries sun, with Venus still moving backward through the sign of self. This configuration has not appeared in this particular shape in nearly 2 decades. If you have been feeling something you cannot name, a pressure behind your eyes, a restlessness in relationships that were supposed to feel settled, a quiet grief for something that has not died yet, but that you can already feel is shifting. That feeling is not random. It is not anxiety. It is not age. It is the eclipse already working. Because eclipses do not wait for the exact moment. They arrive in the days before, moving through the body before they move through the sky. You may have already noticed it. The sleep that is technically adequate but leaves you heavy. The conversations that feel like they are happening behind glass, present but somehow not quite reaching you. The thought that returns right at the edge of falling asleep, the one you push away because there is no clean answer to it, and it is too late at night to begin something that large. You push it away. It comes back. It has been coming back for days. Something in you is being illuminated right now, whether you are ready for it or not. And the thing being illuminated is not a problem to fix. It is not a failure to correct. It is a question that has been waiting with extraordinary patience for exactly this kind of light. You have been here before, not in this exact configuration, not in this particular year, but in this feeling. The feeling of being at the hinge of something. The feeling of standing in a doorway where the room behind you is familiar enough to call home, and the room ahead is not yet visible, but somehow, in a way that defies the logic you usually rely on, you already know you are supposed to walk through it. The nights have been stranger than usual. Not necessarily filled with dramatic dreams, though some of you have been having those, vivid, heavy things that leave sediment when you wake, images that do not resolve into meaning but that sit in the chest all morning. For others, it has been the opposite, a strange blankness at night, a sleep too flat and too quiet, and then waking at some hour between 2 and 4 in the morning with a clarity that is uncomfortable because there is nowhere to put it in the dark. Just you and the ceiling and a thought you have been circling for longer than you would like to admit. Your body has been carrying something. You may have felt it as a tightness in the sternum, right in the center of the chest, not pain exactly, more like pressure. A held breath that never quite releases even when you consciously try to let it go. Some of you have noticed it in the jaw, a clenching that happens without your permission. Others in the shoulders, a weight that massage does not fully reach because it is not muscular. It is something older than muscle. It is something the body knows before the mind is willing to acknowledge it. That is where we are. That is what is happening right now on these specific days in this very particular window of time, and that is where we begin. There are thousands of you finding this video in the same narrow window of ours, which means thousands of people right now, in different countries, different time zones, different circumstances, all carrying some version of the same weight. That is not nothing, that is actually remarkable. You are not alone in this. Whatever you have been feeling in the days leading up to March 25th, it has company. Quiet company, the kind that does not need to announce itself, but real company nonetheless. If this is your first time here, welcome. Consider subscribing. This channel exists for exactly the kind of person who finds themselves searching for language to describe what they are already living. And if you have been here before, I'm genuinely glad you are back. Before we go deeper, leave a comment below. Not a wish, not an affirmation about who you want to become. Instead, write this. Write what you are willing to finally stop carrying. One thing, whatever came to mind first when I said that. Whatever your body just responded to. Write it down because the act of writing it is itself a part of what this eclipse is asking of you. Now, let us go into what is actually happening and why these particular days matter more than most. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that belongs to people who have spent years being genuinely good at attending to others. Not the exhaustion of physical overwork, though that is often present too. This is something more precise than that. It is the exhaustion of a person who has become so practiced at reading the emotional weather of everyone around them, a partner, children, colleagues, aging parents, friends in their own crises, that they have largely forgotten what their own weather feels like. They have forgotten because they stopped checking. They stopped checking because there was always someone else's weather that was more urgent, more visibly distressing, more immediately in need of attention. And you are good at this. You have always been good at this. It is, in fact, one of the things you quietly take some pride in. The capacity to hold space, the capacity to remain steady when others are not, the capacity to absorb a great deal without appearing to. What the days around this eclipse tend to surface, for people who are built the way you are built, is the quiet cost of that particular competence. Not through crisis, not usually. Through a subtle but persistent sense that something is slightly off in the relationships you have tended most carefully. Not broken, not bad, slightly off. Like a note that is technically correct but not quite in tune. You cannot always identify what is creating the feeling. You only know that conversations that used to feel easy now require a kind of effort you cannot explain. That the people who love you are not doing anything wrong, but their presence sometimes feels like more work than it should. That you have been performing okayness for so long, that you are no longer entirely sure when you are performing and when you actually are. That particular blurring between the performance of fine and the actual experience of fine is one of the signature experiences of a Venus retrograde in Aries moving through a lunar eclipse on the relationship axis. Venus, the planet that governs how you love and what you value and what you believe you deserve, has been moving backward since early March. Backward through Aries, the sign of the self, the individual, the one who stands alone. When Venus retrogrades through Aries, it pulls the reviewing inward. It asks with increasing insistence, what do you actually want? Not what have you agreed to want? Not what was reasonable to want given the circumstances of your life. What do you want? And for people who have spent decades making themselves useful, making themselves accommodating, making themselves smaller or larger, or whatever shape the situation required, that question does not arrive gently. The sleep disruptions are real. The 2 a.m. waking is real. There is a physiological component to eclipse windows that traditional science would not validate, but that the bodies of sensitive people consistently report, a kind of low-grade alertness that will not fully release, as though something in the nervous system knows that the ordinary rules are temporarily suspended and has decided to remain watchful. You may have been waking at the same time every night for the past week. You may have noticed that what wakes you is not noise or light. It is a thought. The thought that has been waiting for the quiet to make its case. Some of you have been dreaming about people you have not thought about in years. An ex-partner, a parent who has passed, a version of yourself from a much earlier chapter, the person you were before you made certain choices, before you settled into the life that is now your life. These are not random visitations. The eclipse in Libra, opposing a Venus conjunct Sun in Aries, has a specific appetite for the past, specifically for the relational past, for the dynamics, the bargains, the moments of quiet self-erasure that accumulated over years into a shape you now call your personality. The dreams are not haunting, they are informing. They are the underground part of the process, the part that moves in images when words are not yet available. Some of you have noticed something harder to name than exhaustion or disruption, a kind of transparency in the way you are moving through your days, as though the ordinary opacity that protects you from your own depth has thinned. You see through things more easily than usual, including yourself. A choice you made years ago, a relationship you have maintained past its honest expiration, a story you tell about yourself that you now suddenly recognize as a construction rather than a fact. These things are becoming visible in the particular quality of light that eclipse season brings. This is not comfortable. Seeing clearly is very rarely comfortable when what you are seeing is the architecture of your own compromises. But discomfort of this kind is not a problem. It is a signal. It is the feeling of something real approaching the surface after a long time underwater. There is also something more tender present right now for many of you. A longing without a clear object. Not longing for a specific person or outcome or version of your life. Something more diffuse than that. A longing for something you may not have words for, except perhaps this. You want to be known. Really known. Not appreciated, not needed, not depended upon. Known. Seen in the particular, specific, unrepeatable way that you are, rather than seen in the role you have been performing. And the ache of that longing, when it surfaces during these days, is partly grief. It is grief for all the times you made yourself legible to others by making yourself smaller, simpler, more manageable. And it is also, if you stay with it long enough, something that points toward the future, because longing of this quality is directional. It is the self, indicating what it is moving toward, even before you have a conscious plan. All of this, the exhaustion, the 2 a.m. clarity, the dreams, the transparency, the longing, has a source. It is not random sensitivity. It is not just a difficult week. It has a name and a date and a configuration in the sky that has been building for months, and now we can call it what it is. On March 25th, the sky does something it has not done in this exact form since 2006. A full moon in Libra perfects as a penumbral lunar eclipse, the first eclipse of this year, with the Sun sitting in early Aries, directly conjunct Venus, who has been retrograde since the 1st of March. The moon is at 5 degrees Libra, the Sun and Venus are at 5 degrees Aries. The eclipse falls on the nodal axis, with the north node pulling toward Pisces and the south node releasing from Virgo, and this means the eclipse is not simply an amplified full moon. It is a closing of a loop, a hinge point in a story that, for many of you, began somewhere between 2006 and 2007. Think back to that period if you can, not to the external events necessarily, though those matter. Think about who you were in relationship at that time, what you were figuring out about yourself, what you were beginning to discover about what you actually needed versus what you had been taught to accept. What was opening or ending in the territory of love, commitment, self-worth, your sense of whether you deserve to take up space and have preferences and make demands. Because the Saros cycle that governs this eclipse, the 18-year rhythm through which eclipses recur on the same axis, is returning to that same territory now, not to repeat it, to complete it, or to reopen what was left unfinished. This is what eclipses do. They do not create events so much as they reveal what has been developing underground, what has been growing in the absence of light, and then they illuminate it all at once. The crack in the mirror that you have been pretending not to notice. The eclipse is the moment you can no longer look away from it. And the particular mirror that is cracking right now is the one you have been looking into for most of your adult life. The mirror of how you appear in relationship to others. What you reflect back to them. What they reflect back to you, who you believe you are because of how you have been seen. The Aries-Libra axis is the most personal of all the astrological axes because it is the axis of self and other, and it asks a question that sounds simple, but is in fact one of the most difficult questions a human being can sit with. Where do I end and someone else begins? For people who have spent decades in relationship, raising families, building partnerships, taking care of aging parents, maintaining friendships through difficulty, the line between self and other has often become genuinely blurry, not because you lost yourself dramatically, because you dissolved slowly, because accommodation is easier than confrontation, because need is louder than preference, because love, in practice, often means setting yourself aside, and you are good at love. Venus retrograde in Aries is the planet of love moving backward through the sign of self. This is not a metaphor. This is the actual mechanics of what is in the sky. Venus rules what you value, what you find beautiful, what you believe you deserve, the quality of your relationships, and the core story you tell about whether you are lovable and worthy of receiving as well as giving. When Venus retrogrades, it asks you to review all of that. When it retrogrades through Aries, it asks you specifically, have you valued yourself? Have you loved yourself with the same quality of attention you have given to others? Have you been honest about what you actually want? Or have you been translating your wants into the language of what is acceptable, what is reasonable, what will not cause trouble? For many of you, the honest answer to those questions is difficult, not because you are broken or because you have failed at something, because you were taught very early and very effectively that your needs were less important than your usefulness, that love was earned through accommodation, that the best way to be safe in relationship was to be indispensable to the other person. These teachings are not moral failures. They are survival strategies that were genuinely useful at one point. They carried you, but they were never meant to be permanent. And the eclipse, in its brutal and clarifying way, is lighting up the places where the strategy has calcified into a prison. Saturn in Pisces adds a layer of dissolution. Saturn is the planet of structures. The walls, the rules, the commitments you have made and kept at cost to yourself. In Pisces, Saturn's structures are not destroyed so much as softened, waterlogged, made permeable. Boundaries that felt solid are becoming negotiable, not because you are choosing to renegotiate them, but because the energy of the time is working on them from underneath, dissolving the certainty that once held them in place. This can feel like instability. It can feel like something is being taken from you before you know what you're getting instead. It is neither of those things. It is the walls becoming thin enough for light to come through, and also thin enough for you to finally see through them. Neptune has recently moved into Aries for the first time in over 160 years. Neptune dissolves whatever it touches. In Aries, it is beginning to dissolve the concept of the individual self, the fixed idea of who you are, the identity you have built and defended and maintained. This is a multi-year process that is only just beginning. But on these days, in this eclipse window, its influence is already present as a quiet undermining of certainty about the self. Not crisis, more like the edges of who you thought you were becoming softer, less defined, more open to revision. Mars in Cancer adds something else to this particular week, something that may be the most immediately felt of all the energies present. Mars, the planet of action and drive and the instinct to protect, is moving through Cancer, the sign of home and memory and the emotional body. Mars in Cancer does not charge forward. It circles, it protects, it moves from the wound outward, meaning that much of the action it generates is reactive. Not chosen action, but defensive action, the kind that erupts when something touches an old sore place before you have time to decide how to respond. If you have found yourself in conversations this week that escalated faster than you intended, or if you have felt a surge of feeling, protectiveness, resentment, a sudden flood of old emotion that seemed disproportionate to what actually happened, that is Mars in Cancer making itself known. It is not irrationality, it is the old material, activated by the eclipse, moving through the body looking for a door. Mercury in Aries is adding its own quality to the mix, a sharpness of mind that can cut both ways. Thoughts that arrive faster than usual, clarity that is raw, unpolished, not yet translated through the diplomatic filters you usually employ. You may have found yourself thinking things in recent days about relationships, about your own history, about what you are and are not willing to continue, that surprised you with their directness. Thoughts that in ordinary time you would immediately soften or qualify, arriving now without apology. This is Mercury in the sign of the self-asserting, in the window of an eclipse that is illuminating the same territory. The bluntness is information. The thought that arrived before you could manage it, that thought has been true for longer than this week. The eclipse is simply reducing the delay between what you know and when you are allowed to know it. And then there is the nodal axis itself, which sits at the spine of this eclipse. The North Node in Pisces, the South Node in Virgo. The North Node is the direction of growth, what the soul, in astrological terms, is moving toward. Pisces is the sign of dissolution, of surrender, of the kind of knowing that cannot be systematized. The South Node in Virgo is what is being released. The compulsive analyzing, the self-criticism, the perfectionism, the habit of turning every experience into a problem to be solved. For a person whose survival strategy has depended on being the most competent person in the room, the most organized, the most reliably correct, the invitation of this nodal axis is a radical relaxation into not knowing. What you release from the South Node, the relentless self-auditing, the impossibly high standards you hold yourself to while extending patience to everyone else, creates the space for what the North Node is offering. A softer, less controlled, more genuinely open experience of being alive. The mirror is cracking at the hinge, not because something terrible has happened, because you have grown. Because the image it was showing you was always a partial image. The version of you that made sense in the context of your relationships, your roles, your history. And the part of you that exists outside of all those contexts is pressing against the glass, asking for a different angle, asking to be seen in a way the old mirror never allowed. What this transit is asking of you is not comfortable and not small. It is asking you to be willing to see yourself without the frame your relationships have always provided. It is asking you to sit with the question of who you are when you are not performing a role, when you are not needed, when the room is quiet and there is no one to attend to. It is asking whether the person in that quiet room is someone you know. And it is asking whether you are willing to begin the work of introduction. That question, who are you when no one needs anything from you, does not arrive as an abstraction during eclipse season. It arrives as a disruption in the ordinary movement of your days. It arrives as friction in relationships that should be frictionless. It arrives as a sense of displacement that has no geographic explanation, because the displacement is not about where you are in space. It is about where you are in the story of your own life. Let us begin there. With the friction. You have noticed it most acutely in the relationships you have invested in most deeply, not in the casual ones. Those are fine, those are manageable, those have a surface quality that eclipse energy does not penetrate. The friction is in the close ones, the ones where the stakes are real. And the nature of the friction is strange because it is not about conflict exactly. It is more that you are suddenly, and without having decided to, experiencing your relationships from a slightly different position than the one you have always occupied. Like a chair you have sat in for decades that has shifted imperceptibly, and your body keeps adjusting for the position it remembers and finding that the position has changed. Nothing is broken. The chair is still there, but you are not sitting in it the same way you used to. This happens in relationship when Venus retrogrades through Aries. The planet of how you connect begins moving backward through the sign of how you stand alone, and the effect is a subtle but persistent re-evaluation of every significant connection you have maintained. Not intellectually, not as a project of criticism or resentment. The re-evaluation happens in the body, in what you feel when you are with certain people versus what you tell yourself you should feel. In the gap between those two things. And for a person aged 45 or 55 or 63, that gap has often grown wider and quieter over the years, like a crack in a wall that gets painted over each season until one year the paint will no longer hold. The eclipse is the year the paint will no longer hold. What is coming up for many of you is not new. This is one of the most important things to understand about this particular transit, and I want to stay here for a moment, because there is a way that the spiritual conversation around eclipses tends to frame what surfaces as new information arriving, revelation, awakening, new chapters, and sometimes that is true. But for people who have done the kind of interior work that comes from 40 or 50 or 60 years of living a conscious life, what tends to surface in eclipse windows is almost never new. It is old, deeply old, old enough to have acquired the quality of bedrock, something you stopped examining because you stopped believing it could change. What is rising now is the version of you that existed before you learned to be so useful, before you learned that your value was conditional, before the specific relationship, and you know which one, most of you already know, taught you that your preferences were negotiable, but your availability was not. That version of yourself did not disappear. It went underground. It learned to be quiet because being quiet was the cost of staying connected to the people you loved. And it has been quiet for a very long time. But the eclipse axis on Aries and Libra is particularly hostile to long suppressions of the individual self. Aries, at its core, is the energy of the self asserting its right to exist, not in aggression, but in the simple, fundamental insistence of being. I am here. I am a specific person with specific needs and specific truths, and I will not continually translate them into forms that are more convenient for everyone else. That assertion, when it surfaces in someone who has suppressed it for decades, can feel enormous. It can feel dangerous. It can feel like it will cost you everything you have built. It will not cost you everything, but it may cost you some things. And part of what this eclipse is asking you to do is to begin, slowly, carefully, but honestly, reckoning with what those things are. Not to decide immediately, not to act from the charged energy of the eclipse week itself, but to look, to let yourself see clearly what you have been trading and what you have been receiving in return, and whether the exchange has been honest. The pattern that this eclipse is targeting, the one that runs as a long thread through the narrative of your life, is the pattern of trading self for safety. It takes different forms in different people's histories. For some of you, it appeared first in childhood, the family dynamic that required you to manage the emotional weather of a parent, to be the reliable one, the easy one, the one who did not add to the existing difficulty. For others, it appeared in early adulthood, a relationship that required so much of your emotional attention that you gradually shifted the center of gravity of your life to accommodate another person's needs, and then another's, until the center of gravity was somewhere outside of you entirely. For others, it happened more slowly, through decades of small accommodations that individually seemed reasonable and collectively added up to a self that is largely defined by what it does for others. The thread is the same in every variation. Safety was purchased at the cost of self, and the eclipse is the moment when you are no longer able to pretend that the price was sustainable. What makes this pattern so durable, what allowed it to run for decades without being fully examined, is that it worked. That is the part that makes it hard to release. The accommodation genuinely did keep the peace. The self-erasure genuinely did make you easier to love, or at least easier to keep. The habit of making yourself useful genuinely did protect you from the worst outcomes you were afraid of. It worked. And then it kept working. And the longer it worked, the more it became invisible. Not a strategy anymore, not even a choice, just the shape of your life. But every pattern that was designed to serve a young person's survival eventually outgrows its usefulness. What protected you at 25, the agreeableness, the vigilance about other people's moods, the capacity to put your own discomfort in a drawer and simply continue, is not serving you now. Not at 50, not at 57, not at 62. The drawer is full. It has been full for a long time. And eclipse energy on the Aries-Libra axis has a very specific relationship with full drawers. It opens them, not gently, not on a schedule you set, with the particular indifference of something that has been waiting longer than it was told to wait. This is the place in the script where I want to slow down. Because what I am describing is not something to be solved or healed or transcended in a single eclipse window. This is a pattern that has roots in the most fundamental architecture of how you learn to be a person in relationship. It will not dissolve in a day. It should not dissolve in a day. Its dissolution is a process that deserves time and care, and the kind of patience you have always shown everyone else but rarely given to yourself. What the eclipse is asking of you right now is not completion. It is beginning. The willingness to look at the pattern without turning away. The willingness to name it to yourself with the same honesty you would offer a close friend who was describing the same thing. Because here is the thing about being in between the person you have been and the person you are beginning to become, that no one usually says clearly, this place is not comfortable, and the discomfort is not a sign that something has gone wrong. The in-between is the work. It is not the waiting room before the work. It is not the disruption before the real thing begins. The in-between is the real thing. The dissolution of the old identity, the not yet solidification of the new one, the specific vulnerability of being neither fully yourself, as you have always understood yourself, nor yet visible as whoever you are in the process of becoming. This is the terrain that demands the most courage, and it receives in the culture that surrounds you the least recognition. You are in between right now. You may be in between your 50s and your 60s. You may be in between a version of your relationship that is ending and a version that does not yet exist. You may be in between the career or purpose that has defined you for 20 years and something you can sense but cannot yet articulate. You may be in between the parent of dependent children and the parent of adults who no longer need you in the same way, which is its own specific grief that almost no one adequately names. In every case, the experience is the same in its essential quality. The ground you have been standing on is shifting, and the new ground has not yet risen to meet your feet. This in-between is different from the transitions of earlier life. When you were younger, the in-between was pointed towards something you could anticipate, a new role, a new relationship, a new version of adulthood. The transition had a destination. What you are standing in now is pointed not toward a destination, but toward a self, a truer version of a self that has always existed, but has been buried under layers of role and responsibility and the accumulated weight of all the choices you made when you believed your needs were the least important ones in the room. The eclipse does not create this knowledge. It simply removes the last available reasons not to listen to it. The eclipse in Libra, with its direct opposition to Venus retrograde in Aries, asks you to stay in this place without rushing through it, without manufacturing resolution before resolution is actually available, without performing certainty you do not yet feel, not even to yourself. And this is harder for you specifically, for someone who has spent decades being the steady one, than it might be for someone who has more practice with not knowing. Your steadiness has served everyone around you for years. It is genuinely valued. But it has also required you to compress your uncertainty into something manageable and presentable, and the eclipse is creating conditions where that compression cannot hold. Something is beginning to stabilize underneath all of this even now. It is not visible yet in the full sense. It does not have the quality of certainty you are accustomed to working from. But it is there. And if you have been paying attention to your own interior in these days leading up to March 25th, you may have felt it as something very quiet under the disruption. A thread, a direction, not a plan, not a destination, not an answer to the large questions, just a direction. A faint knowing about which way to move, even without knowing where movement leads. It might feel like a small decision that was impossible last month, and now, strangely, feels available. Not easy, available. The difference matters. It might feel like a conversation you have been avoiding that you now find yourself in quiet moments almost ready to have. Not because you have resolved your ambivalence, but because the cost of the avoidance has become clearer than the cost of the honesty. It might feel like the first appearance of something you could call, very tentatively, desire. Your own desire, not what would be good for the situation, not what the other people in your life need from you, what you specifically and honestly want. The mirror has cracked at the hinge. The old reflection, clean, complete, reliable, showing you only the angle you were accustomed to seeing, is no longer the only thing available. In the crack in the multiplied image, in the new angles that appear where the break has opened space, a truth is visible that was never visible before. It is not a comfortable seeing. It is an honest one. And honest seeing in this particular eclipse window is the beginning of everything that is trying to come through. Now, 3 specific invitations for these days. Not generic spiritual practice. Not what is always recommended in times of transition. What this eclipse on this axis in the presence of this Venus retrograde is specifically asking of you. The first is what I would call devoted return to self-inquiry. Not journaling in the familiar sense, not processing the day or cataloging gratitude. Something more specific, a daily practice for the remainder of March and through April of asking yourself one question and then sitting with the honest answer. The question is this: what did I want today that I did not allow myself to have? Not material things, internal things. Did you want to say something and instead said something more comfortable? Did you want to be alone and instead stayed present for someone else's need? Did you want to simply exist without producing or contributing or attending, and instead found a way to make yourself useful because existing without purpose felt uncomfortable? Write the honest answer, not the defended answer, not the rationalized answer. The first answer that arrived before your mind had a chance to make it acceptable. This practice, done consistently over the coming weeks, will begin to draw a map of the territory that Venus retrograde in Aries is asking you to reclaim. It does not require action. It requires only the willingness to see clearly what you have been trading. The resistance that will arise, you will feel that this kind of self-focus is selfish. You have been trained to feel that. The training was effective, and it was also wrong. Attending to your own interior is not a withdrawal from relationship. It is the prerequisite for honest relationship. You cannot offer someone a genuine version of yourself if you have no clear idea of what that genuine version actually contains. The second is conscious pausing at the edge of agreement. This one is behavioral, and it is very specific to this Venus retrograde eclipse period. In every moment this month where you feel the impulse to agree, accommodate, absorb, or smooth over, pause. Not to refuse. Not to create conflict where conflict is not warranted, but to pause for long enough to notice whether the agreement is genuine or whether it is the old reflex. The one that says making someone comfortable is safer than being honest. The one that says your preference is less important than the other person's ease. The pause is not dramatic. It does not need to look like anything from the outside. It is internal, one breath, one genuine check. Is this what I actually think, actually want, actually feel? Or is this what is easiest? The distinction, practiced over days, begins to build something that years of accommodation has eroded. The sense of yourself as a person with a genuine interior life that is separate from the interior lives of the people you love. This is not detachment. This is the foundation of real intimacy. Two people who are actually distinct from each other, choosing each other, rather than two people who have fused into a shape that was never meant to be permanent. The resistance that will arise, you will feel that the pause creates distance, that it is unfair to the other person, that you are being difficult or withholding. Sit with that feeling. Notice that it is familiar. So familiar, it is almost automatic. That familiarity is information. It is the proof that the habit runs deep, and deep habits are precisely what eclipses are built to illuminate. The third is what I would call tending what is genuinely yours. Amid all the reviewing and illuminating and reclaiming that the eclipse is initiating, there is also something simpler being asked, something physical and immediate. Spend time this week doing something that exists solely because it brings you satisfaction, not because it is useful, not because it serves someone else, not because it is productive in any way that you would need to justify to another person. Something that is yours, a walk that has no destination, music listened to in a room alone with your full attention, cooking something elaborate and specific because you want to eat it, not because you are feeding anyone, drawing badly, reading something that is not improving you. The eclipse on the Aries axis, the axis of the individual self, is asking you to practice inhabiting your own experience for its own sake, not as training for something else, not as self-care so you can show up better for others, for its own sake, for the sake of knowing what it feels like to be you in your specific body, with your specific preferences, taking up exactly as much space as you actually take up without apology and without audit. The resistance that will arise, it will feel indulgent. It will feel like you should be doing something more important. That feeling is the eclipse. It is the exact feeling this practice is designed to interrupt. March 25th, a lunar eclipse, a full moon in Libra, illuminating the exact place where the self and the other have been negotiating terms for as long as you have been in relationship. Venus moving backward through Aries, holding you in review, not as punishment, not as deprivation, but as the insistence that you look, that you actually look at what you have been building and what it has cost and what it would mean to build something truer. You found this video. You are still here 40 minutes into it, which means something in you recognized something being said, something that named a texture of experience you have been living without adequate language for. That recognition is not small. Most people, when they encounter something that asks them to look honestly at their own patterns, close the tab. You stayed. And staying is itself an act of courage, even if it does not feel that way right now, even if it feels like the most passive possible thing. The kind of person who stays for a conversation like this one is a specific kind of person. Not everyone wants to be seen at this depth. Not everyone is willing to sit with the discomfort of recognition, the sensation of hearing something true about yourself said out loud and feeling the truth of it in your body before your mind has time to argue. That willingness is not a personality trait you were born with. It is a practice you have developed over years, sometimes through genuine suffering, sometimes through the quieter kind of difficulty that shapes a person nonetheless. You have earned the capacity to hear what this eclipse is saying. I want to say this directly to you, to the specific person who is here right now, carrying whatever you have been carrying into these unusual days. You have been attending to others with extraordinary faithfulness. For years, for decades. And the eclipse that arrives on March 25th is not asking you to stop. It is asking you to begin attending to yourself with the same quality of attention, the same patience, the same willingness to stay even when staying is uncomfortable, the same deep regard that you have always reserved for the people you love, now directed inward, not as a project, not as self-improvement, but as simple, honest recognition of the person who has been here all along, doing the work quietly without sufficient acknowledgement. The mirror cracked at the hinge. What you see in the break is not a damaged reflection. It is a truer one. It is the angle the intact mirror never showed you. And it is showing you now because you are ready for it. Not because the universe designated you, but because you have done enough of the work, lived enough of the life, arrived at enough of an honest reckoning with your own patterns, to be able to hold what this eclipse is revealing without it destroying you. That readiness is not luck. It is the result of years of genuine interior effort. It belongs to you, and it is the exact quality you need for what is beginning. Leave one more comment before you go, not what you are leaving behind this time. Write this. Write one true thing about yourself that you are finally willing to claim. Something you have known but have not fully owned. Something that belongs entirely to you outside of any role, outside of any relationship, outside of any usefulness. One true thing. Write it here, in the open, and let it be witnessed. If this video found you in the right moment, if something in it named something real, please share it with someone who might need this language right now. And if you have not yet subscribed, this is the kind of channel that earns that over time, not through spectacle, but through the consistency of showing up for the real conversation. Thank you for staying with this, for the full length of it, for the willingness to be in this kind of company, in these kinds of questions on these specific days. The eclipse is not the end of something. It is the moment the light changes, and in the particular quality of light that a cracked mirror casts, scattered, multiple, new, you are, whether it yet feels this way or not, finally beginning to see yourself whole.